Good evening and welcome to the virtual Board of Education meeting. Attending a virtual meeting may be a new experience for some, so please allow me to take a moment to review some procedures that will allow everyone to participate. When speaking, please state your name, address, and topic before beginning your comments. Some meeting participants are joining by telephone and cannot see the face or name of the speaker as shown on a computer screen. The public participation at board meetings as per bylaw 0167.3 applies to this virtual meeting as well. Please mute your phone or computer microphone to prevent feedback and background noise during times when you are not speaking. There is a chat box found in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. The chat box may be used to pose a question. The name or telephone number of the person posting the chat comment will appear on the screen. The board president will read the question aloud during the appropriate section of the meeting for the guests calling in by telephone. This meeting has an opportunity for public comment under number 9 on the agenda. If you would like to register to make comments during this meeting, please type your name, address, and topic in the chat box at this time. If you are joining this meeting by telephone tonight and would like to register to speak, please state your name, address, and topic now. All Board of Education votes will be conducted through a roll call vote. The meeting will be recorded. The recording includes anything typed into the chat box. President Johnson, the meeting is all yours.
All right, thank you, Dr. Opper. At 7 o'clock, we will come to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Petke, if you could call the roll, please.
Mr. Seeger?
Here.
Mr. Forst?
Here.
Mr. Holman? Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mrs. Petke here. Mr. Johnson, excuse me, Mrs. Johnson?
Here.
And Mr. Shellard?
Here.
Dr. Opper, can you verify publication of meeting, please?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. All right, presentation, district goal setting and next steps. Dr. Opper.
All righty, let me just move into presentation mode. And always best to start with the first slide. Let's try that one more time. So as we do regularly, we assess the academic progress of our students and look at the means by which we can make improvements. And the administrative team has been working with staff to do that over the past several months. And I wanted to give you a high-level overview of some of the key decisions and recommendations that are being made at this time. So I just put in here, we use key performance indicators here in the district, and the purpose is so that as an organization, we have clarity as to where we're going. So organizations without clear goals don't have a focused direction, and that can be problematic. So it's a very important part of what we do. The first is something that you'll be addressing a little bit later on tonight, and that would be the adoption of the new math materials. And the purpose there is to increase our student achievement in mathematics. Some of the materials that we had been using, particularly those at the elementary level, are being discontinued.
Dr. do you have a slide presenting right now?
Pardon me?
Do you mean to have a slide showing?
Yes.
No, presented.
Let me try that again.
There we go.
Excellent. I'll take you back one just for the fun of it. I did show you a cute little slide about the importance of having goals. And moving on, we were talking about the adoption of math materials, which is on the action items for a little bit later this evening. One of the reasons we're looking at that is because some of our materials are outdated and being discontinued. More importantly, our students are not graduating with the expected proficiency level that we would want. So we want to work backwards, looking at ACT, post-secondary opportunities for students, those going into the military or the world of work. What level of proficiency do they need in mathematics to be successful in that area? And are we on the trajectory to ensure that they get to that level? So that's one of the reasons we're looking at math materials. And finally, the new materials based on the research really focus on math practices. So you'll see a real emphasis or a shift in the way in which math is being taught in these new materials. Next, we have the district literacy plan. The entire plan will be presented by Mrs. Cerno at the March curriculum and some high-level review at the board meeting next month. The reason there, we want to consistently include phonics instruction for the 4K to second population and implement interactive read-alouds for 4K to fifth grade, again, to increase student achievement in the area of literacy. So the data that we're currently seeing when we assess our students is that some of the foundational literacy skills are missing for some of our students. So we really want to give a devoted emphasis in the schedule to teaching phonics to students. Today, it's often referred to as word work, but when people say word work, what they mean is phonics. This also supports what you're going to see in the district literacy plan, which is a multi-year phased-in process. So these are just the initial steps of a plan that will probably last for roughly 5 years and be revised as we move along. Next, we're also looking at the district technology plan. We want to ensure that we're using the ISTE standards, and in case anyone wanted to know, I did spell out, ISTE stands for the International Society for Technology and Education. Those are national standards that we use, in fact, international standards, and we want to ensure that all of our students have these skills, not only to enrich their school experience, but to ensure that they're ready for a technology-rich world outside of the walls of the school. And the fourth item is our secondary social studies materials adoption. This is still underway. We're looking at both some print materials and potentially some online resources. And again, the primary reason is that the current materials are outdated. New history is being made every day, and we want to ensure that our students have access to current and relevant materials. The other thing you'll notice about the social studies standards is that they're very inquiry and process based. And so the new materials tend to engage students more in thinking broadly about issues and topics in the world around them. And we want to ensure that the materials support that kind of instruction. So the next steps, what the board will be seeing over the next several months, is work that the admin team is going to start with, and that's going from the current state to the desired state chart. You might remember a chart like this. We've seen it before. It looks like stair steps moving up. And as the stair steps go up, it's what are the various high-level steps that need to take place in order to attain that particular goal. We'd also like to do a Gantt chart. This is something you probably saw frequently from Hoffman during our referendum projects. This is to show a visual timeline. Where are the overlaps in the process? We want to make sure that there's balance. We're taking on 4 very aggressive goals in a very short timeline. So we want to make sure there's both balance and continuity in the process. And finally, the administrative team is working to get goal teams together of stakeholders that will help to be the boots on the ground for accomplishing these goals. So that's a high-level view of what we're presently working on. Now I'll pause there to answer any questions that you might have.
I don't think we have any. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right, so then next up would be the Q12 Strategy.
And for that, we just have a brief verbal summary, and I'll invite the administrative team to chime in. One of the things that we're trying to do is be more purposeful in our communication for the purpose of building trust. So we're really focusing on the 3 C's: clarity, consistency, and communication, and then adding the opportunity for support staff to also have a committee of their own. One example of something that we've just done is working on the substitute calling system. It's an integral part of what we do, and it might sound like a very simple process, but there are a lot of moving parts. And so we've documented the system, shared it with all district staff, and invited feedback. And then we continue to work to refine that system. And that's a process we've been going through with a number of our different systems. Again, hopefully a legacy this administrative team leaves for those in the future to make transitions a lot easier for all of our staff. Administrative team, anything you'd want to add?
This is Dan. I think I would say that as we're moving through the staff and program changes, there were some paraprofessionals that were impacted, and we're trying to work as closely with them to make sure that we're receiving their feedback, receiving their input, and trying to work with unintended consequences of how we shift things moving forward. So it's been a good experience being able to work with those staff members.
And I think that's all we have for you this evening, unless there are other questions.
All right, thank you, Dr. Robert. Announcements. The district received the following contributions: a donation from the Little Oak High School Middle School staff. December Denim Days donated $190 for the Urgent Needs Fund. Dr. Melanie Opper donated $130 library board stipend to purchase books for the Title I reading program. And the Wisconsin Beef Council awarded $100 to Mrs. Cordes and the Ag program to be used towards the purchase of beef products. So thank you all very much for your generous donations to the district. Consent agenda. Would any member like any item removed from the consent agenda to be dealt with separately?
Oh, I have to recuse myself.
All right, let the record reflect that Mr. Seeger is recusing himself from the consent agenda. All right, and did any member wish to have any item removed? Okay, we will then vote by general consent. And hearing no dissent, the agenda carries. You want to let Mr. Seeger know? He can resume. All right, public comments. I do not see any comments or anyone signed up in the chat box, rather.
Nor do I.
Correspondence, there was no correspondence this month. Board recognition. We have some outstanding wrestlers to talk about this evening, and that would be Brian Griffin, Kevin Clem, Colton Clem, and Andrew Elmhorst. And I see that Mr. Brad Johnson is on this evening. Would you like to maybe give us a rundown of the outstanding season that our wrestling team had?
Actually, if Mr. Wolfgram could just share with you what I typed up, that would work a little better for me at this time. Thank you.
Sure. If you would, Mr. Wolfram, please.
Okay, I wasn't prepared to read that, but let me see if I can pull it up. Give me a moment. I can put it in the.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Wolfgram will be sharing the certificates. They were signed this evening. And maybe we can do a little photo op at school with the students receiving their certificates, Coach Johnson, as time would allow in the next day or so. We'd love to be able to put that in the Wolfpack Express. And I do see that Brian is on with us this evening. I'm not sure if any of the other wrestlers are on, but Brian, would you like to tell us a little bit about your experience at state?
Well, it was a little different this year. 1 second. It was a little different. It kind of felt like a normal tournament just because it was at Wausau East compared to when I went and watched my brother a few years ago. But it was still pretty special to be there, and a lot of good wrestling going on. And so it was a fun experience.
Okay, I am prepared. I have found my script. My apologies for not having that right away. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right. Tonight we are featuring Kevin Clem, Colton Clem, Brian Griffin, and Andrew Elmhorst. On top of that, we would also like to feature the wrestling coaching staff. Start off, Kevin Clem took third at state in the 113-pound weight class. Kevin's lone loss came in the first round. It ended 8-10. Kevin wrestled well all year and has been a consistent staple in the program. His last match recorded his 100th career win. Congratulations, Kevin. Colton Clem took second at state in the 120-pound weight class. Colton had a buzzsaw of a bracket with numerous state place winners returning. His aggressive and relentless approach, good verbiage, Mr. Johnson, led him to our first state finalist in 13 years. He joined the 100 Win Club as a junior and has been pivotal in the growth and success of our program. Brian Griffin competed at state in the 138-pound weight class. He did not place, but competed well all year. Brian joined the 100 Win Club during the season as well. Brian has been a huge part of this program's rise in the past 4 years. Andrew Elmhorst placed fifth at the 285-pound weight class state in the past weekend, and Andrew's career was the stuff you read in a book, starting wrestling 4 years ago, and now he is considered one of the best wrestlers in the state. Andrew has been an example of the growth of this program that has taken in the past 4 years. We also want to give a shout out and thanks to Mr. Rowan for the pep band for providing a parade-style rally send-off to wish the wrestlers good luck prior to their departure. And we would be remiss if we did not recognize the entire wrestling coaching staff. Coach Johnson, I will toss this over to you because I think the assistants would like to hear directly from you on this one.
Being completely honest, I'm doing a dirty diaper as we speak. So if you hear some screaming here, she's not too happy with me. But no, it's been a fun ride. The coaches put in a lot of time, but these kids, their success is attributed to their ability to commit to whatever we say and whatever we ask them to do. So the praise goes to those kids, because without them being willing to do what we ask of them, it would never have happened. And so we're just so thankful to be able to push through a senior class like this and have the ability to, I think there was 532 individual wins between the 6 guys. So that's just unbelievable. So we're super proud of them. And as coaches, when they're getting the love, we're getting the love. So we're definitely happy about that.
Coach Johnson, can you tell the board how long it has been since we've had this many wrestlers go to state?
In 2004, we sent 5 kids to the state tournament. So it's been since 2004 for sure. If you look back at the boards, there hasn't been many finishes as a team at the state tournament as good as this one. I think it was in the 2006 year, we had a first and 2/3. So a second, a third, a fifth, and a state qualifier is pretty impressive. And it placed us 10th in the entire state. So that's awesome.
I think I also want to recognize the parents of the wrestlers. The amount of time and dedication that parents put forth to have their child succeed at a high level in a varsity sport is not just a seasonal thing. It's a year-round gig. And as a parent of a varsity athlete myself, it's dedication, it's time, it's patience, it's tears, it's a lot of work. And we thank the parents for the support of their program. I'd like to thank the coaching staff and congratulations to the students. You represented Manawa as about as high a level as you could, and we're very, very proud of you.
All set. Thank you.
Congratulations to everybody. Brian, do you have a parting memory from this season in wrestling that's going to stick with you as you move on in life?
I'll just probably when I won at sectionals after losing 3 years in a row, that was a big deal to me. Wasn't really all about like how I did at state, but yeah, just after losing in 3 years in a row and finally making it, kind of completed it for me.
Your perseverance really paid off. Congratulations.
Thank
Do
you.
we have any of the other wrestlers on this evening? I know there are so many activities going on. It's always hard to participate, but we'd want to give them a chance if they are on tonight. Well, congratulations to all of you. And those certificates will be coming up to the high school tomorrow in the interoffice mail.
All right, congratulations, guys, and congratulations, coaches. All right, February celebrates some special events in the world of education. It is National School Counseling Week from February 1st through 5th. National FFA Week is the 20th through the 27th, and it is also Career and Technical Education Month, February 1st through the 28th. So there are 3 proclamations from Dr. Taylor in your packet, talking about each of those recognitions for public education. Dr. Opper, District Administrator's Report.
Thank you very much. I want to begin by acknowledging Amber Feetzer. She is our student council rep on this month. I'm not seeing Ethan. Amber, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks. How are you?
Doing wonderful. So tell us a little bit about some of the activities that the Student Council has been doing since last month, since the last time we had a board meeting.
We got 3 big things that are coming, or that were planned and coming up. So we did the Valentine's Day shakes, which were a big hit, and we're planning on doing Shamrock shakes now for St. Patrick's Day. We're doing a pet supply drive as well right now with the elementary school. And then we're planning a prom coming, basically like a homecoming and prom together.
Really? That's exciting. Do you have any details you're ready to share yet, or
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So just recently, the whole high school is back in person 5 days a week. How's that going for everyone?
I like it. I think it's been very good. I think a lot of the students really appreciate it. I think it's nice to just have everybody back.
We would agree. It definitely is. Have you noticed any challenges Anything you think the board should know about in this return?
I don't think so. I actually think it's been going pretty smoothly.
Excellent. Would anyone else have a question for Amber this evening? Well, Amber, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what your plans are for after high school.
My plans personally?
You betcha.
So I'm hoping to go to Concordia University in Mequon, and I'm hoping to get into their interior architecture program, and they work with the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. So I'm hoping to do that. The whole school getting done, like all that project and that work and stuff, when I went to the meetings during RTI, that really actually helped me kind of go lead to that major. I really, really liked that. And yeah, I've always kind of wanted to do it. So that's the plan.
It sounds like a very solid plan, and I'm glad that our referendum actually helped solidify this idea that you would enjoy getting into that line of work.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Amber this evening?
Thank you for joining us, Amber.
Thank you, guys.
It's always a pleasure to have our students on with us. Thank you, Amber. And next up is the legislative update. And I'm going to try changing screens and let's see. That was not what I was going to share. It will be eventually, but that wasn't the topic I was looking for right now. So let's try again. Here we go. So the legislative updates lately have really focused quite heavily on the governor's budget and the educational component of the governor's budget. 2 meetings last week with CISA 6 gave us a high-level view of some of the main items that we can expect to see. The first slide, it's a very lengthy PowerPoint. I'm not going to take you through the whole thing, but I did want to just share a few of the high-level items that are predicted to likely occur. So first and foremost, the request is the largest increase to school district funding that we've seen in a number of years. So I wanted to bring that to your attention, that there has been a great emphasis on public education. The slide on general aid, it was suggested that all of the items in yellow are the most likely to get bipartisan support moving through this budget process. So if we take a look at that, restoring 2/3 spending is likely to get some traction. The increase in the revenue limit, also likely to get some traction. Increasing the low revenue ceiling, which would be extremely beneficial to the district, would be another item getting some interest at the legislative level. At any point, if you have specific questions, don't hesitate to ask, and I know Carmen is on as well. She also had a meeting on the same topic last week. One of the things we've all been asking for is a second look at the funding formula. Many districts across the state of Wisconsin are experiencing declining enrollment. The birth rate simply is down across the state. So for that reason, plus all of the COVID challenges that we've experienced, have resulted in examination of what is the best way to do pupil counts for the next revenue worksheet that we do. So one of the suggestions was taking a look at whatever number is highest, if it was going back to 2019 and using that figure, or if it might be the third Friday count from 2020. So we're asking for options that would depend on what's best for each individual district going into this budget cycle. Also an interesting chart just to show the impact of membership during the pandemic. You'll notice it really changed dramatically, the membership decline. And the rest of the presentation, while interesting, I will share in the board weekly update, and we can put it into the board packet. There are a wide variety of things that are being requested, but some of them probably don't have the level of support to move forward, or at least not at the level that's being suggested or requested in the governor's budget. But we will keep a very close eye on these things as we move through the budget season. It's very early. We usually don't see a completed budget till at least July. And sometimes it hasn't been completed until well into the fall. Any questions on that so far? All right, we generally take a look at the enrollment report. Not much change month to month here. We had our second Friday in January count, which is that other very important count besides the third Friday count that we do annually, but only a difference of 2 students from last month. Any questions there? All right, a lot of activity going on in the curriculum department this month with the math adoption, looking at the literacy plan, still trying to secure some social studies materials to review, and then putting together that district technology plan and how that's going to roll out with staff. So lots of things happening in that area as well. Now I'm ready for the other screen. DHS has continued to remind us with COVID, we should not let our guard down. They're still encouraging us to follow the CDC recommendations, which would include using all of the mitigation strategies that we have been using all along. People have said, how have schools done it? Those schools that have been in session since day one in the fall, how have we managed to stay in person? And it really has come down to being vigilant with those mitigation strategies. And so even though we're moving into educators being vaccinated starting in the month of March, we don't want to let our guard down at this point in time. We're reminded to be vigilant because there are some variant strains that we're seeing of the virus. And the research in science is still so new that we don't know if people who are vaccinated can still transmit the virus to other people who are not vaccinated. So they're still asking us to take our precautions, and I thank everyone for doing so. In terms of staff vaccinations, we had a sign up, and plans are now starting to come together for the local vaccination site that would be held within the district. It will be highly dependent on when the amount of vaccine is available within the community. So depending on the number of doses that Waupaca County gets, they'll determine which district or couple of districts they can do during a week. So they said it may very well take the month of March and into early April to get all of the county schools staff vaccinated. They also sent us a vaccination preparation plan. So we've already developed our plan. We've got the names, the phone numbers. We know we've set aside rooms. So at a moment's notice, we would be able to set up our local clinic. And I think that's everything I have, unless you have questions for me this evening.
All right, thank you, Dr. Eppert. School operations report. Are there any questions for Ms. Brower or Mr. Wilgram regarding their reports? Any comment from either of you?
This is Danny. I just wanted to say that the elementary school made it through their first big cold snap, and kids are finally back outside, and the snow has been great, but let me tell you, it was wet today. But we're really happy that it's nice out because the kids really need to get outside, get out of their classrooms. But adding in being able to go to music and art class has been really good, I think, for morale in the whole elementary school. Kids are a little bit out more. They're a little bit more upbeat. Teachers have a little bit more breathing room so that when they have prep time, for the most part, they have a quiet room. And they're not stepping over people or trying to just kind of stay in a corner so that they're not interrupting art class or music class. So we're really happy that that's going well.
Good to hear. All right, business related reports. Does anyone have any questions for Mrs. O'Brien? Any comments, Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes, I do. If you've read my report, or if you looked at my report, you'll notice that I talked a lot about the CARES Act money that was allocated to the school district of Manawa. The district can claim up to $180,771 through this federal program. This includes $158,594 for the public schools and $22,176 for the private school. I want to make sure that both the board and the public know that this amount has been spent for items that were listed on my report. This includes protective equipment, custodial equipment and supplies, professional development, technology equipment and software, and a myriad of other items. Thus far, the public schools have spent all of our allocation and more to keep the district healthy and safe. There is an opinion in the public that because the CARES Act money was allotted to schools, that districts do not need as much funding in the next budget cycle. And I want to just make sure that I am saying very publicly to all of you, this is simply not true. The expenses that were incurred were because of the COVID-19 pandemic. These expenses were not part of the regular costs of the district. These were things that were over and above what we would normally have purchased to have for the school year. I will be going over the spending more in depth with the Finance Committee at our next meeting on March 8th. So I'm hoping that if people would like to know more about how we've spent our money, that please join us in that meeting to get a better and more thorough understanding of that and what we're planning for next year's budget and the future down somewhat, but not fast enough.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien. All right, are there any questions for Mr. Covarrubias about his report? And any comment?
Sorry, the phone next to me decided to ring just as I was about to unmute. No comment this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, board comments. Treasurer Scheller, you were able to serve as the WASB delegate again this year, even though the meeting was virtual. If you'd like to maybe talk about that a little bit.
Sure. I was going to say very interesting doing it virtually. Everything goes way slower when it's done virtually than it was in person. So, but went well. I just kind of like to go through the 10 resolutions that we discussed. All of them were, everybody would have guessed on them, but the 10 resolutions were 1 cent sales tax for school infrastructure, technology, and tax relief. Kind of an interesting one, but the resolutions are just, you're suggesting something for the legislature. It's not a binding thing, so just a lot of different things. Broadband access. Well, let's come up with a lot of them. Enrollment holds harmless. Introduction to indigenous tribes. They want to make sure we're teaching about that. It was a Act 31 back in 1989. Sounds like a lot of districts aren't really teaching it too much anymore. So they just want to bring that up. Special education flexibility to address emergencies. Assessment and report card waivers with COVID stuff. All the different school districts wanted, they're struggling with some of the results. So they wanted to pass a waiver on some of the report cards for rehiring retired teachers and staff. And that was a very popular one. I think everybody wants to do that because retired teachers are kind of needed for something. And superintendent evaluation. And comprehensive school safety legislation. And then mascots, logos, and imagery. That one was, they talked on that one for about an hour. They did 2 years in a row. A year ago, they talked about 45 minutes. This year, same one came back, talked for another hour or so. But it's about 2.5 hours to go through the 10 resolutions. But and then next day, Donald Driver gave a presentation for an hour and a half. That was very interesting. Talked about his life and how things have gone for him and where he came from and how things are going. But that was very nice. But that was a highlight for me anyway. So I know Donald Driver was talking. He said his son has 43 Division I offers for football. So I thought that was pretty interesting too.
That's pretty impressive.
Hopefully he goes to Wisconsin. All right, well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Do any other board members have any comments to share publicly? All right, committee reports. Any questions or comments for any of our committee chairs? All right, unfinished business. Item A, consider approval of policy 142.5.
Ross Johnson, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve Neola policy 0142.5 vaccines as presented.
Vacancies.
Vacancies as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do I have a second?
Mrs. Becky, I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Petke. Any discussion? Hearing none, we will vote by roll call. Mr. Seeger.
Aye.
Mr. Forbes.
Aye.
Mr. Scheller.
Aye.
Mr. Holman is absent. Mrs. Petke.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
And it is an aye from Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries on a roll call vote. Mr. Holman absent. New business, item A, consider approval of 4K12 mathematics materials adoption.
Bruce Scheller, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the 4K-12 mathematics materials adoption as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Scheller. Do I have a second?
Luke Seeger, I second.
Second by Mr. Seeger. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger.
Aye.
Mr. Forbes.
Aye.
Mr. Holman is absent. Mr. Scheller.
Aye.
Mrs. Petke.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
And it is an aye for Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries. Mr. Holman absent. Item B, consider approval of fiscal year 2021 budget revisions.
Dan Forbes, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the fiscal year 2020-2021 budget revisions as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Forbes. Do I have a second?
Ross Johnson, I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger.
Aye.
Mr. Forbes.
Aye.
Mr. Scheller.
Aye.
Mrs. Petke.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
And is an aye from Mrs. Johnson as well. Mr. Holman is absent. Motion carries. Item C, consider approval of the school year 2021-22 staff and program change proposal.
Russ Johnson, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the school year 2021-2022 staff and program changes proposal as presented.
I have a motion from Mr. Johnson. Do I have a second?
Stan Forbes, I second.
Second by Mr. Forbes. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Petke?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson is an aye as well. Motion carries. Mr. Holman absent. Item D, consider approval of food service equipment purchase.
Bruce Scheller, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the purchase of a convection steamer from the food service equipment budget as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Scheller. Do I have a second?
Mrs. Petke, second.
Second by Mrs. Petke. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Petke?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And is an aye from Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries. Mr. Holman absent. Item E, consider approval of ADA Fitness Center accessibility option.
Stan Forbes, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the ADA Fitness Center accessibility option add-on to the middle school / high school paving project as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Forbes. Do I have a second?
Luke Seeger, I second.
Second by Mr. Seeger. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Petke?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
There's an aye from Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries. Mr. Holman absent. Item F, consider approval of, is it Fepperly proposal?
Yes, it is.
Ah. So looking for a motion.
Mrs. Petke, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the Fepperly proposal as presented to provide the following asset information and maintenance handbook, asset management and capital expense projections, maintenance training program.
I have a motion by Mrs. Petke. Do I have a second?
Stan Forbes, a second.
Second by Mr. Forbes. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Petke?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
It is an aye for Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries. Roll call vote. Mr. Holman absent. Item G, consider approval of purchasing replacement lift.
Russ Johnson, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the purchase of replacement lift for the middle school, high school as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Johnson. Do I have a second?
Luke Seeger, I second.
Second by Mr. Seeger. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Petke?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
It is an aye for Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries. Roll call vote. Mr. Holman absent. Item H, consider approval of Neola semi-annual updates. We are excluding currently update 144.5, 2522, and 5895. Is there any feedback that anyone would like to offer on the proposed policies at this time? They will be up for a vote at the March regular Board of Education meeting. Consider approval of Neola 144.5, board member behavior and code of conduct. And there is a revision there, and is there any comment on that or any discussion, feedback?
This one, after the committee had conversation, it was recommended that it should be brought before the whole board. The question here is electronic devices like cell phones during board meetings. And I gave an example of a recent situation that happened during the library board meeting where a member had a question, and had we not had an answer, it may have postponed a decision for another month, but because I was able to Google the answer on my cell phone, we were able to resolve the answer to the question and move on with the business. This particular situation apparently came up during a board meeting in another district where board members were having a sidebar chat about board business during a board meeting using their cell phone. And so that's what prompted one district to ask Neola to put together this language. We've never had such a problem in our district, which is why we brought the language forward for the whole board to consider whether or not this is relevant, or if you would just like me to delete it.
My comment is delete it. I mean, if we're not going to be able to have our cell phone here, if there is an emergency, how do you deal with something at home? We all got tight schedules. My personal opinion is delete it.
That was my feeling as well. We don't have a problem. We've never had a problem with board members misbehaving using a cell phone during a board meeting. I don't, you know.
I would agree. Delete it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
get rid of it, get rid of
Get rid of
it. Right, so we'll take that out of there, and then that policy would be up for approval at the March regular board meeting with that item deleted from it. Next, we have consider approval of Neola 2522 library media centers. And Dr. Opper, you had had some input from Mrs. Krieger, who is our library media specialist. And are there some suggestions from her?
Yes, so from the optional items, staff for the library media center in each school would be providing for the sufficient materials. Then in terms of major goals, she felt all of them were appropriate except for letter D. That really is not in her purview, or at least it isn't the primary purpose of the work that she does. So she suggested leaving out D, but including the rest, which are quite typical of today's library media centers. And then checking the box for having procedures consistent with the long-range plan of the district.
Does anyone have any objections to that, or comment or questions about the suggestions that were put in with the expertise of Mrs. Krieger?
I think they look fine.
Agree.
I agree.
Okay. All right, so then that policy will be up for approval at the March regular board meeting. And then we had Neola 5895, which is student employment. And Dr. Opper, you're going to consult with Mr. Wolfgram and Mrs. Kane, and there were some suggestions made.
There was only one fill in the blank, and that is who has the official title of permit officer. And for our district, that has been the secondary school secretary. So we didn't put the name Mrs. Kane in there. That's who does this work. We tend not to put in the person's name because if there's any change in staffing, then you have to go back and revisit and approve a policy over 2 meetings. So we use the generic title of the person who does the position.
All right, so any questions about that, guys? Are we okay with that?
I think it's fine.
All right, so that will be up for vote then next month at the March meeting as well. Item L, consider approval of the middle school, high school locker usage plan.
Dan Forbes, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the middle school, high school locker usage plan as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Forbes. Do I have a second?
Mrs. Pecky, second.
Second by Mrs. Pecky. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Pecky?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And Mrs. Johnson is an aye as well. Motion carries. Roll call vote. Mr. Holman is absent. Item M, consider approval of secondary spring musical plan.
Bruce Scheller, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the secondary spring musical plan as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Scheller. Do I have a second?
Mrs. Pecky, second.
Second by Mrs. Pecky. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Pecky?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mrs. Johnson is an aye as well. Motion carries. Roll call vote. Mr. Holman absent. Item N, consider approval of District Health Office Support Services Clerical Paraprofessional Job Description.
Mrs. Pecky, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the District Health Office Support Services Clerical Paraprofessional Job Description and further approve the revised position to begin on March 1st, 2021.
I have a motion by Mrs. Pecky. Do I have a second?
Russ Johnson, second.
Second by Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Pecky?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Aye from Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries. Roll call vote. Item O, consider approval of technology technician job description.
Mrs. Pecky, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the technology technician job description as presented.
I have a motion by Mrs. Pecky. Do I have a second?
Dan Forbes, second.
Second by Mr. Forbes. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Pecky?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Aye from Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries. Roll call vote. Mr. Holman absent. Item P, consider approval of technology ed, computer science, and engineering job description.
Dan Forbes, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the revised technology, education, computer science, and engineering job description as presented.
I have a motion by Mr. Forbes. Do I have a second?
Seeger, second.
Second by Mr. Seeger. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Pecky?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Aye for Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries. Roll call vote. Mr. Holman absent. All right. Consider approval of ACT proposal as presented.
This would normally run through a committee, and I apologize. We missed it for the Policy and Human Resources Committee. So if you do have any questions, Mr. Wolfgram is on and can speak to the advantages to this strategy for the ACT administration coming up on March 9th. But because it is time sensitive, we did need your approval this evening.
Russ Johnson, I move that the Manawha Board of Education approve the ACT proposal as presented.
I have a motion for Mr. Johnson. Do I have a second?
Mrs. Pecky, second.
Second by Mrs. Pecky. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Pecky?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And is an aye for Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries. Roll call vote. Mr. Holman absent. Next meeting dates. We have February 23rd, which is tomorrow, Human Growth and Development at 6 o'clock. That is a virtual meeting. March 8th, Finance, 6 o'clock, virtual. March 8th, Buildings and Grounds, immediately following the Finance, or at 7, virtual. March 10th is Curriculum, 5 o'clock, virtual. March 10th, Policy at 6, virtual. And March 15th is our regular Board of Education meeting, 7 o'clock, virtual meeting. I am looking for a motion to adjourn and reconvene in closed session for the purposes of discussing the employment status of employees over which the board has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility, administrator evaluation, and administrative contracts.
Bruce Scheller, I so move.
Motion by Mr. Scheller. Do I have a second?
Mrs. Pecky, second.
Second by Mrs. Pecky. Any discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Seeger?
Aye.
Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mrs. Pecky?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And is aye for Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries. Mr. Holman absent, and it is 7:59 p.m., guys. All right, thank you very much. So we'll have to have Bryant close out of here.